Hey everyone, welcome to the NFL edition of the Daily Fantasy Flex podcast for September 7th, 2016, brought to you, of course, by FantasyLabs. I'm Matthew Freedman, the editor-in-chief, and it is week one. We finally got here, and for the next 17 weeks, I don't know, who knows, maybe 20 weeks, this podcast will be bringing some NFL DFS fire, and bringing that heat will be a rotating crew of FantasyLabs pros. Most weeks, if not every week of the season, I'm going to be joined by some combination of Adam Levitan, Peter Jennings, and Jonathan Bales. And also most weeks we're going to be joined by a guest. So, for instance, next week we'll be joined by Evan Silva. That's going to be a great show. But this episode, we decided to go with a Coors-esque stack of studs and have all of the Labs regulars on the show. Now, these modern men don't need any introduction, but I'm going to introduce them all the same. Batting leadoff is Adam Levitan at Adam Levitan. He's a DraftKings analyst, a co-host of the Daily Fantasy Edge podcast, a FantasyLabs writer, and a two-time FSWA award winner. Adam, who are you playing a kicker this week?
I'm waiting on it. Yo, Freedman has some hot kicker takes. If you guys need your kicker takes, you can find them on Freedman's Twitter. He's actually going to rank he's going to rank every kicker from 1 to 32 for with full projections for week one. So yeah, but I didn't know this was being recorded visually, so I am exposing my arms for the first time to the public. So if you guys are listening to this on iTunes, if you actually find this on FantasyLabs and find the video, you can see my arms.
And it is a good site. Just to correct the record there, 33 kickers, because I am going to rank myself in that. I'm probably going to be ahead of at least two kickers that I can think of. But it's and as you said earlier, off the air, if I could pick myself on FanDuel, I definitely would. You have to have that type of, that type of trust in your own skills. Now, also on the show and rocking a very sweet hat, we have Peter Jennings at CSURAM88. He's a co-founder of FantasyLabs, a DraftKings analyst, and a moderately successful DFS player. Peter, are you ready for Thursday's game at Mile High?
I'm stoked going to the game with my little bro and the wife and another FantasyLabs pro, Birdwing. So ecstatic for that. Broncos are going to win even with marginal quarterback play, and the NFL season will be getting going. So I'm really pumped.
Yeah, I can't wait. I will be very interested to see what Trevor Siemian is able to do. It's not every day that you have a seventh-round, second-year guy who threw more interceptions than touchdowns his senior season, starting for the defending Super Bowl champions. So this really will be something that's pretty interesting. And then finally, we're joined by Jonathan Bales at Bales Football. He's a co-founder of FantasyLabs, the founder of Road Academy, a DraftKings analyst, and the author of the Fantasy Sports for Smart People books. Bales, nice tank top there. Why no shirt with sleeves?
I heard there were some bets before the show, so I just want to make sure that the right people won.
I should say the right people definitely did win, but they're not bets. They are skill game propositions.
Right.
For the record. And and so kind of on that note, I should say that throughout this show, I imagine that there will be some skill game propositions that are made if people have very strong takes. And let's talk a little bit about, just to introduce kind of the format of this podcast. The Flex this year is going to be very DFS-centered, very slate-centered. So we're not going to talk a lot about matchups. We're not going to break down the matchups in that way. We will do that on the website with a lot of different articles, and there are some pods that do that. But this show is going to be very focused on roster construction and game theory. So I think that's really the place to start, kind of first things first. And Adam, I'm going to kick this question to you. With this particular slate, when you are making lineups, thinking about who to include, where are you starting this week? Like, who is the first piece that you are putting into your lineup, or the first pieces into your lineup?
Yeah, so when the DraftKings first came out with their salaries, I thought that the cap was actually relatively tight. I was having a little bit of trouble squeezing in a lot of the high-priced guys, even getting one of the Julio, Odell kind of guys in there was difficult. But then as the month went on, there was so much that opened up. I mean, I think Devontae Davis injury opened up Marvin Jones at 4,600 in a big way. Obviously, Jamal Charles, everybody just thinks that recovering from any ACL tear is just a walk in the park these days. This summer has proven that it's not, and Jamal Charles is Exhibit A. Expecting Jamal Charles to be inactive Sunday, I'd be hard-pressed not to play Spencer Ware. at 4,400, and then also Dak. I think on DraftKings specifically, you can make a better case against Dak than maybe you could on FanDuel. But I do think that Dak opens up a lot. If you play Dak and Ware, if you play Dak, Ware, and Marvin, you can just do whatever you want with the rest of your lineup.
Yeah, Peter, any other guys to add on to those that are kind of just automatically making their way into your lineups?
I don't know if there's as many automatic guys. I think if you are going to play a lot of the guys that Adam mentioned, which I think are great plays, you're going to end up on one of the elite running backs, especially over on FanDuel. You'll end up on Gurley or David Johnson quite a bit. That's an interesting conversation. In addition to that, I think you'll end up on one of the elite receivers on DraftKings with the limited slate. There are other options of running back, but I do see Julio or Beckham Jr. or Hopkins ending up on a ton of rosters, given that we have so many value plays now, assuming Charles is out, assuming you play Dak Prescott in your cash games.
Yeah, Bales, do you have any other guys to kind of add into that sort of de facto cash game core of chalky players you're okay with playing?
Yeah, I think what those guys said is correct. It's Ware, Marvin Jones, and Dak for sure. Dak on FanDuel. One guy who I think is very obviously underpriced on one side is Fleener on FanDuel. Just way too cheap relative to DraftKings. So I think that that's almost close to an auto start in cash games where you're plugging Fleener in there. And yeah, on both sides, I think you need to figure out who you're going to pay up for at running back, and there's a couple different options. Lamar Miller, I think, is an interesting one, and Latavius certainly on DK, or both sides actually.
Yeah, I don't want to play Fleener on FanDuel. I agree he's too cheap, but I'm riding with Jordan Reed. I think you have more than enough money to play Jordan Reed. I know he's 2K more, but I think he's so much more reliable than Fleener for cash.
I agree with that. I'm off Fleener now with the roster construction. I think DraftKings is still a little bit more tight than FanDuel. They're both pretty loose now with all the options. But on FanDuel, when I've been making my rosters, Jordan Reed's ending up on pretty much all of them.
Oh, yeah. He's going to score 8 touchdowns.
Bales, to kick it back to you.
Proposition on that. I'll take the under.
Yeah, definitely. We want a skill game proposition on that. Bales, to kick it back to you. If you are putting Fleener into your lineups at FanDuel, what are you doing with the excess money?
I think you're going Julio and Antonio. That's what you do that running back. You potentially still get if you have Spencer Ware, you're potentially still getting one of the top backs as well if you're playing Dak. So yeah, that's the way that I would go. I think that the savings is enough, and I understand sort of the reasoning where tight ends are volatile, but the top tight ends like Gronk and Reed are a little bit different than the other guys. But I still think that the savings is enough where I'd rather have both of those elite receivers in my lineup.
Mm-hmm. Now, Pete and Adam, if I could kick this to you. So you're taking the Jordan Reed side of that. What are you doing? So Bale said that he would go with Julio and Antonio. What are you doing to sort of compensate for not having both of those guys in your lineup?
Yeah, I don't want to give away my whole lineup here, but what I will say is that there may be a way to have Reed, Julio, and Antonio in your lineup.
What?
Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing, but you definitely can. You can fit a lot of different guys, and it really just comes down to preference on certain players. And the one nice thing with all these guys being so chalky, obviously there's a lot of leverage plays in tournaments. But I do think in cash games amongst the pros, we'll see a lot of similar lineups.
Yeah, and so, Pete, you just mentioned there some leverage plays, and let's go ahead and get into that. Let's talk about the chalky players that we want to fade, and then the leverage plays and the pivot plays that we can go to. So, Adam, I'm going to kick this to you first. Who are the chalky players you're looking to pivot away from? What are the ways you're looking to leverage the high ownership there, and who are the players you want to pivot to?
Yeah, so let me bring up my ownership projections here. I'm just going to models on labs, and I'm sorting by projected ownership. So on DK, I have Julio Jones projected between 26 and 30. And then after that, I have Amari Cooper, Spencer Ware, and Marvin Jones between 21 and 25. I don't have let me see what I have Dak at. I have Dak at 17 to 20 right now. And people might think that that's low, but quarterbacks are always kind of flatter just because there's so many options. I mean, you can make a good case for 14, 15 quarterbacks to play this week. So I think Dak on DK specifically will be like 17 to 20. But back to guys that I think that are worth considering fading, I think Marvin Jones, if he gets to that 25% range, there's so many interesting pivots there. Marvin Jones is at 4,600. I would say an interesting pivot is Vincent Jackson. If I'm going to roster a 33-year-old wide receiver, it's going to be in week 1. It's going to be when Desmond Trufant is likely to be shadowing Julio Jones, and it's in a possible shootout with the Falcons. So I think Vincent Jackson will go under-owned because he's in the Marvin range. And I also think that Anquan Bolden, I mean, we know that Darius Butler is hurt and not very good. He'll be playing slot corner for the Colts. And Anquan Bolden, another old guy who I like to use early in the season. I mean, not only is he a price point pivot off of Marvin Jones, he's also a pivot on the same team. So if 2 touchdowns go to Anquan instead of Marvin Jones, we're just lapping the field.
Hey, Levitan, I want to let you know we don't need to play guys our own age in week 1. We can go with some younger guys. There are plenty of those in the league.
Yeah, I know. Believe me, this doesn't make me feel good. And I sent a tweet today about Antonio Gates. Like, it's really – I don't feel good about it.
Yeah. Peter, who are your thoughts on chalky plays you're fading and then the other guys that you were going with instead?
Let's talk quarterback for a second. So I think Dak Prescott is going to be the main guy in cash games at this point, at least from the sharper players. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity to have different roster construction by paying up at quarterback. I've talked extensively about how much I like Andrew Luck, so we'll save some more words there. If you want any more Andrew Luck hot takes, I'm your guy. I'm going to be pretty heavy on him. But I think another guy who's not getting nearly enough attention is Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers on the road in Jacksonville. I do expect Jacksonville to be a little bit better on defense, but I think Aaron Rodgers is probably the best quarterback in the league. And with Jordy Nelson at least playing at this point, I think that that should really help the entire offense. I think Randall Cobb could be great. I think that there's a variety of guys that could do really well as a stack with Aaron Rodgers, and I think your roster will end up a lot different with him at quarterback versus Dak, which is really the goal in going contrarian is creating a different, more leveraged lineup. So I think at quarterback can go a lot of different directions, but in particular, I think Aaron Rodgers will be woefully under-owned relative to where he should be.
Bales, any thoughts?
Yeah, I thought the point on Dak was good. I think he just has such a wide range of outcomes. We have no idea what he's going to do. There's no type of player that we can look at to try to predict what he's going to do. He's a rookie, but he runs. He's drafted in the 4th round. He has a good line. They're going to run the ball a lot. He has a pretty good matchup. So it's a very difficult thing to project. But I do think that everyone's going to be on him on both sides. So paying up at quarterback, like Pete said, is probably not super contrarian, but somewhat contrarian. We typically don't see exorbitant ownership on quarterbacks like we might at running back, for example. And then the other thing I think you could do to be a little bit contrarian, or guys I might get away from that are a bit chalky, like I said, Jordan Reed, and then Gronk as well. I think that everyone's going to play Gronk no matter what. Sort of, not everyone, but he's going to be top 3 ownership in terms of tight ends, and especially on DraftKings, I would probably be going almost punting at tight end, even with the cap flexibility, and going very high priced at receiver.
Yeah, right now on DK, I have Delaney Walker and Rob Gronkowski both tied for most ownership at 13 to 16%. And I don't think a lot of quote-unquote pros or people really following closely are going to play Gronk, but I do think that with the price savings that we have, a lot of newer players will play Gronk.
One thing from last year, a lot of the pros got burned by playing Gronk a little too much. A lot of guys have talked about it. Now all the pros, I definitely won't be on Gronk week 1, and it's going to be really tilting if he goes off, but I like the fade. Yeah,
I agree with that. I think I'm fading Gronk, but I still think he's going to be would anyone say he's not going to be top 3 ownership on both sites?
Yeah. Like I said, I have him tied with Delaney on DraftKings, and on FanDuel, I have Reed, Fleener, and Gronk as the top 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. No one mentioned, I think, a running back. Are there any running backs that you are looking to get away from, or ways that you think you can leverage those running backs in a successful manner? Bales, let's start with you.
Not really. I don't typically try to fade guys that I think are super underpriced at running back, so I'm not really going to fade where. I think on FanDuel, where the pricing's a bit different, you have some guys who, you're looking at like Ingram, D'Angelo on Monday. If you're playing that slate, Lamar Miller, Latavius. So there's some different options where the deviation in pricing isn't so drastic like it is on DraftKings, where you could potentially get away from but that's not really something that I'm trying to do. So if I'm going to be chalky, it's typically going to be at running back.
Mm-hmm. Thoughts, Peter?
It's tough. I'm kind of with Bales on this. Running back is one of the positions that is trickier to find leverage plays. Normally I try to do it with roster construction. I try to, everyone this week I think is going to have Ware and an expensive guy. So maybe there is merit and more value in going two of the mid to high tier guys. One guy originally really liked was Lamar Miller, and he was hyped and touted quite a bit. And I've heard a lot less about him recently. So there's a guy that I could see myself using quite a bit in tournaments. Still love Latavius Murray, but I think he'll be popular on DraftKings. Running back's just a really tricky position this week, I think. So I'm going to be on a core, but I do think that some of the guys we originally liked will have lower ownership than expected because so much is soaked up with Ware and David Johnson or Gurley.
Yeah. I think you can make a case maybe for fading Ware in tournaments. I mean, if you think he's going to be 30+% owned, I mean, I have him 21 to 25 right now. If Jamal Charles is officially ruled out sometime in the next couple of days, I'm going to bump that up even higher. So the case you could make for it is that Spencer Ware was almost a total zero in the pass game last year. Did catch 8 balls this preseason in limited action, but if he's a total zero on a full PPR site, he's going to need a touchdown against San Diego, and obviously touchdowns can be difficult to predict and volatile. And you could also make a case that if Charkandrick West is healthy, he's a little bit nicked up right now, that perhaps he steals some touches. So it's not a strong case I can make to fade Spencer Ware, but I could make a case for it. And the guys that I would look to kind of do it with are guys in that mid-range like Peter talked about. I mean, I think guys like Lamar Miller and Ryan Matthews and DeMarco Murray and Jeremy Langford and all these guys kind of in the middle in the 5 to 6K range are going to go overlooked because everybody is either going everybody's going stars and scrubs with kind of their roster as a whole.
What do we think the odds are that somehow it's not a Spencer Ware game and it turns into a game where Alex Smith somehow does like something that people don't expect? But yeah, if his ownership is so high, we would have to think that he ends up doing something with the end zone, getting a ton of carries. But what are the odds that it isn't that type of game? Does anyone have any ideas on that?
Yeah.
I think it's under 50% that he doesn't meet his expectation. I would go even lower than that.
Oh, way lower.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's in a great position. Basically, if he doesn't get hurt, he's very likely. But I'm saying his expectation, not even for his price. So with his price, it's much lower than that, obviously. But for kind of where we're projecting him at, I think that he's very likely to do it. I think the game flow will be in his favor, and there's really just not that many options. So the bigger thing is he going to have – what's his likelihood of hitting a number big enough to win a tournament? And obviously that's lower. I think the one thing Adam brought up is the catches. That's the one thing I'm really curious to see is how involved in the passing game he is, because if he doesn't catch any balls, then the likelihood of having that elite game is much lower. Bales, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, what do you guys think about the spread there? It's a touchdown. Obviously that works in his favor, but how much are you bumping him up because of that, if at all? And do you think it's a bit high?
Yeah, I think if this was reversed, like if Kansas City was on the road as maybe like a 1 point dog, or some people would be like, oh, I'm afraid to play Spencer where they're going to get behind and then they're going to take him off the field. So yeah, I mean, game script is something that could throw off Spencer Ware's game too. I do think that if they get behind, we'll see Charkandrick and we'll see Niall Davis, who they kept on the roster. So yeah, I mean, I think you can make some cases for fading. I mean, I'm not, Phillip Rivers is typically a fast starter. I know that's hashtag narrative street, but he always seems to play well beginning of the year and then kind of fade out towards the end. So I think there's cases to be made for fading Ware. Not fading him to the point where you think he's going to get less than 10 DK points, but fading him to the point where he can get less than 20 and you might still be okay.
Yeah, I mean, on the other side of this, he actually was a pretty decent receiver in limited action in college. His junior year at LSU, he had 18 receptions, 230 yards, a touchdown. Like, for a guy who was getting, like, very little action just because of the committees that they run there, that's actually pretty decent. Like, I think he can be a 3-down back. It's just if they want to use any one runner in that capacity, now that they have 3 guys there who look like – they could be superstars if they were just given the ball all the time. Let's continue. Let's talk a little bit about game selection. So obviously it's a big first week of the season. There are lots of different tournaments at various places. Let's talk about this. And Peter, let's start with you because you were sort of the GPP master on the show. What are the contests that have caught your eye, the ones that are standing out to you, and how are you planning on approaching those?
Well, I think the best contest for me is the $2.5 million Sunday special on DraftKings. $20 to enter, really flat payout structure. I think it's a great tournament and certainly something that if you're trying to profit in GPPs would be a great spot to throw a lot of lineups in. Obviously love the Millionaire Maker at $3. I think for a lot of people it's going to be great to max enter that for 150 in. It should be a lot of fun. But again, that's less of a grinded out type tournament just because, you're going to have to hit a really big score in that, which is really tough to do, obviously, with almost 2 million entries. So I think those are the 2 flagship tournaments on DraftKings. I also like $300 tournaments as well. But one thing also I wanted to mention, FanDuel is running those Fiverr tournaments. So that's something I'll be doing a lot of. And then one thing I always say, if you're playing cash games, which is my bread and butter, play as many head-to-heads as you possibly can. In the first couple of weeks, I think that's definitely the highest ROI with the least amount of variance.
Yeah, and just one quick thing. If you are going to max enter some of those contests, you can easily create 150 lineups using the multi-lineup tool on FantasyLabs, of course. So something to keep in mind as you were grinding out your lineups. Bales, any of the contests stick out to you?
Yeah, I think Peter hit on some good ones. It's hard not to just throw a bunch of entries into the Millionaire Maker. The odds are low, but at $3, it's difficult to not mass enter that. The Sunday special, I think he pointed out. I also think the 300, the Blitz, has a very interesting payout structure because it's 3,700 people. Normally when we see that number of people, we have multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars going to first place. We have just 100K and a normal sort of drop off from first to fifth. And the rest of the money has gone to, and this is, I think, pretty common in all of the GPPs or most of the GPPs on DraftKings, to paying more people. So we have like between, I think, 25 and maybe 28% of people. I think in the $3 too, the Millionaire Maker, we have something like between 27 and 28% of people paid out. So that, I don't know how much it changes the strategy per se, but it's definitely interesting that DraftKings is doing that, and it probably makes it a bit less volatile where you're just getting paid more often, and it's not as high variance to enter some of those things. Yeah, those are the big ones. And then what I'm deciding, I know Levitan is doing the same, or maybe has forbidden them for this year. We'll see if he holds to it. Is the Qs, and seeing how much money I'm going to put into qualifiers, and definitely fun, but very difficult to qualify for this championship. So do you think you're going to stick with that, Levitan, all year?
No. I mean, not only is it difficult to qualify, but once you get there, like, it's extremely difficult to profit, right? Like, you qualified last year, and then what place did you get?
Like 80th maybe. But when you get there, you can sell action. So it's not as volatile as people think.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I just had such a bad experience last year. I played the 1K 8 times, and the highest I got was 4th. Just, kind of gave up about 8 times in, and I don't know. Yeah, I'm definitely out on the qualifiers. What I am in on more this year is like the 100-man and under leagues. So I'm not talking about like the private leagues, which are definitely cool, and me and Peter and Al are in one, and I'm looking to do more of those, but I'm talking about the public leagues. Just going over my numbers, I have way better ROI and ITM percentage in those than even in head-to-head and double-ups. So some of these 10-man, 5-man, 3-man, 100-man, 20-mans, I find that I can put my cash line up in there and be really, really profitable. I think people kind of go overboard with fancy play syndrome in those, and my cash lineup does pretty well against those fields. So I like that. In terms of tournaments, I think the higher buy-in, lower person count fits my style better as someone who I think I'm really aware of ownership projection and really aware of what higher stakes players are going to do. So I'm trying to get really like 1 or 2 really good tournament lineups I think are optimal and leverage correctly for the 300 and see how it goes with that.
All right, let's talk about some stacks, because that's really sort of the go-to dominant strategy that people use for tournaments. And let's start with conventional stacks. What are the more conventional stacks that we're looking at? And Bales, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think we're, especially with some news today, I think that Jordy might be somewhat limited. I think we're going to see higher ownership than people think on Rogers, Cobb. I think that Breeze Cooks is going to be pretty popular. I think the quarterback who might be a little more popular than people think is Stafford, just because his receivers are popular. Marvin Jones, obviously. Golden Tate, somewhat. Eric Ebron, a little bit at tight end on DraftKings, and even Theo Riddick, potentially at running back that people could stack, where if all of these receivers, their pass catchers are going to be high-owned or somewhat high-owned, then he's necessarily going to be a bit higher, perhaps, than people think.
Adam, who are you liking in terms of stacking? And I know earlier, before we started recording, you had mentioned some cheaper wide receivers. Any guys you like there?
Yeah, so I think Carr and Amari Cooper is going to be pretty popular just from flowchart kind of roster people, meaning, hey, who are the Saints playing this week? Oh, let's stack their quarterback and wide receiver 1, which I think is fine. I mean, we can have a Delvin Breaux conversation another time, but I'm not afraid to use Amari Cooper against Delvin Breaux whatsoever. I'm not afraid of Amari Cooper's red zone usage last year. So I think Carr and Cooper, I'm having a little trouble getting a handle on exactly how popular that will be, because Carr and Stafford are priced similarly, but I do think both of those will be pretty popular. I actually think Naked Russ and Naked Dak will both be popular, just for their ability to run in and because people don't really want to click on Dez after last year. People don't really want to click on Baldwin and Lockett for volume concerns. So I think Naked on both those guys will be somewhat popular. And yeah, you asked about kind of the low price wide receivers. I mean, it's going to be a slow game between Tennessee and Minnesota, but Tajay Sharp to me is almost a lock to exceed value. And I'm a big Marcus Mariota fan. I like him. I think Pryor and RG3 will be somewhat popular. I think Pryor RG3 will be more popular than Pryor Corey Coleman. And, we can get into this whole Corey Coleman thing. I just think he's egregiously overvalued among experts in the industry, including one Jonathan Bales. And
still game proposition.
Yeah.
There's no way Pryor is higher than Corey Coleman
in ownership.
Yeah.
On DK.
Yeah.
All right, you're on.
All right.
And just for the record, what is being wagered here is a 6-pack of Coors Light or the cash equivalent in Monopoly money. Just so everyone knows.
Next time Bales goes out, I refuse to go to Northern Liberties. He has to come to Center City. I'm sick of going to that dump.
What the fuck are you talking about? I think I met you there last time, man.
Yeah. So the other thing on Corey Coleman is like, I don't want to go into my whole rant here, but I'll also take another skill game proposition on top of that. I'll take under 14 DK points, which is what the projection is for him right now.
I was going to offer that myself, so that's a double up.
Right. Yeah, you're on. This dude's running around like a chicken with his head cut off in the preseason. Never played an NFL snap. One catch for 10 yards in the preseason. RG3, tons of question marks. Improved Eagles defense. Slow game. Run-heavy offense from both teams. All right, I'm done.
Okay, actually,
all the targets. Dominant player in college. Young. He's a lock.
He's fast. He's very fast.
He has good YouTube highlights.
Great YouTube highlights.
He absolutely dominated market share at Baylor, who already had like ridiculous passing stats. It's more difficult to have a high percentage of stats at a team that's on an offense that's throwing the ball really, really well. We saw that with like Tavon, who had an awful market share on an offense that threw the ball all over the field. So I'm as confident on Corey Coleman almost as DeAndre Hopkins when I was touting him in his rookie year.
So I should say I believe that Corey Coleman is a great prospect. I don't know what that means for week 1. I do want to ask a question about that Eagles defense because that's something I've been hearing a lot. People saying, oh, this defense is going to be a lot better. Yeah. How much better is it really going to be? Like, how can we gauge what happened in the preseason and extrapolate it and players they added? Because, I mean, frankly, last year they were terrible, and I think there's a chance that maybe they aren't as good in week 1 as people think that they will be for the rest of the season.
Yeah, so I wouldn't put any stock in the preseason. I put some stock in a regime change. I know Jim Schwartz has had somewhat of a checkered history, but we saw what Kansas City defenses were able to do with Peterson, maybe bring some of that over. But I think the personnel changes is huge. I mean, there's been a revolving door at safety ever since Brian Dawkins left, and they've really shored that up with McLeod playing next to Malcolm Jenkins now, who I think are two really good players. Then you have Nolan Carroll, who I think is underrated, and McKelvin on the other side, who I think can play. And then you have these guys in the front seven. I mean, Fletcher Cox, Benny Logan, all these guys I think are really top flight interior linemen. Pass rush is a bit of a question mark for me, but I do think that the unit is greatly improved and just will be much playing, Brandon Graham, like playing more in his position than he was playing with all these crazy schemes in the past. And also Chip Kelly running these guys into the ground by keeping them out there for 65, 70 snaps. They're going to play way slower this year. I think it'll just be a market improvement for the Eagles defense.
That last point is the biggest one to me. That's why I think they'll be improved in terms of fantasy. They're just not going to have to face as many plays.
One of their data point too in favor of Adam and all this stuff is the total in this game's dropped from 45 to 41 over time. So
yeah,
I think
which is really low.
Yep.
That's potentially Bradford related.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bradford and Carson Wentz related. Wentz being one of the worst quarterback prospects of all time, but we don't need to talk about that. Let's talk instead about more advanced and contrarian stacks. So it's really easy to look at maybe kind of like RG3 and a cheaper wide receiver like Coleman if you're Bales or Pryor if you're Levitan. But what are some of the more kind of, like exotic type of stacks that people might be thinking about for this week? And Adam, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'll go to my favorite one. It's Brock and Will Fuller. Really expecting Chicago to struggle in the secondary, expecting Brock Osweiler to play well under a guy I really consider a quarterback guru in Bill O'Brien, expecting Houston to play very fast, led the league in plays per game last year. We're third in neutral situation pace, and Will Fuller just stepped right in as the number one as a starter, opposite DeAndre Hopkins playing every single snap. It's hard for me to not see Will Fuller getting 5 to 7, maybe even 8 targets in this game. And given that and given his explosive ability, it's just an ideal GPP situation.
I do like that one. Peter, any thoughts there?
Oh, that's one of my favorite ones. I've talked about it a lot. I loved Will Fuller in college. Was just so fast, and I think he's really going to help that entire offense. I love the Texans in general. They're going to play up tempo. I think Lamar Miller will give them great balance. Obviously, Hopkins can move the chain or make a big play at any time. Then you have a guy that can just take the top off the defense. So I like it, and Fuller's very cheap, so is Osweiler, so you can fit a lot of other good players. I think one leverage play that I like quite a bit right now is Carson Palmer to Michael Floyd. I think that's not being talked about nearly enough. I think a lot of people are going to be playing David Johnston. So most people looking for Arizona exposure will be in that camp. Carson Palmer is going to be very underowned in my opinion. There's another one that I think actually won't be as popular, although one of the players will be. I don't think many people are going to do Matt Ryan to Julio. Adam, I know that's your guy. Julio will be heavily owned, but I don't think a lot of people are going to be on Matt Ryan.
Totally agree. Yep. I think, and I don't even hate Sanu. I talked with Matt Harmon about Sanu, and we're on the same page there that we've seen guys like Roddy White and Harry Douglas have huge games. I don't mind even playing Sanu as kind of a game stack situation.
I love that. That was a great pod, and certainly was interesting to hear his take on Sanu. Talked about how Hankerson was on pace for 115 targets or something like that. So I think that's a really good stack and something I've even thought about. The double stack with Matt Ryan is also really interesting, which I think there's a couple guys that makes a lot of sense to do that with.
Yeah, that was actually my exact one was Ryan Julio Sanu. I think that's really, really interesting. I'm in 2 high-stakes season-long leagues this year, and I own Sanu in both of them. I just absolutely love so I think he's a really good player in a really good spot. And they're projected well in week 1. I think they have a ton of upside. He's going to throw to the receivers a lot. So I think that double stack is going to be almost non-existent and a really good play. And I think you could potentially go something like Dak and either Terrence Williams or Witten. And I absolutely hate Witten long-term as a player, but I kind of like him in tournaments this week, where what the Giants have done historically against the Cowboys is play the same defense, which is a variation of cover 2. They play either cover 2 or cover 2 man under, and they let the middle of the field open, and Witten's done a good job against them. Because of that, I think he's going to do that again, and they're very bad against tight ends. I think one of the worst teams in the league last year against tight ends, maybe number 1. And it's because of the defense they play, and then the defense that they play specifically against the Cowboys to take Dez out of the game.
One other thing real quick while we're on this topic, let's talk a little double dip action with one of my favorite combos ever in the history of the NFL. Tavon Austin, Rams D, I'm all in.
Yeah. No, I like it this week, actually.
Oh, how can you not? I think that there's a lot of upside with Tavon this week, and the Rams D – it's in a pretty good spot, even on the road. I almost always take home defenses, but San Francisco could just be atrocious on offense. So I like that quite a bit, and I think Tavon with the double dip is a pretty sexy one. Adam, I know you got a couple double dips.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many that you can play. Tavon is clearly the best one this week. I wouldn't use Jarvis Landry and Dolphins D this week, but I think that's in play as we look further down the line. There's so many. I think Sproles and Eagles D makes some sense this week because with the
I love that one.
Yeah, I mean, with the situation with the Eagles wide receivers, we don't know how healthy even Jordan Matthews is. They're going to have Ertz and a bunch of guys out there that can't play. So I think they use Sproles a lot in the pass game, and we know Sproles is also the Eagles punt returner. And it's my belief that the Browns, despite all their talent, are going to struggle offensively, at least early in the year.
Can we talk just a little bit about a skill game proposition that might be geared around Tavon Austin? Peter, does he score a touchdown this week?
No, I don't want.
I mean, just any touchdown. Last year, this was the guy who scored 10 touchdowns. It doesn't have to be a return touchdown. It could be a return, receiving, rushing touchdown.
Sure, I'll take it. No proposition.
I'll take that.
Okay, so you score over 8 touchdowns.
So you're taking that he will score a touchdown this game?
Oh yeah. I thought you were saying
I'm on the opposite side of that.
Yeah, I'm gonna take you on that, Peter.
Okay.
All right.
Scores, dude. That would be so tilted.
We're gonna give him like a goal line carry at the expense of.
That would be how it happens. That guy gets.
He gets goal line carries.
Yeah, I know
he does.
It's the reverses, and he gets the pitches. They're gonna get him the ball near the end zone.
Yeah,
the one thing I'll say is that I think Tavon was just completely overdrafted. I love watching Tavon, but I don't think he's a great receiver. But I do think if they used him in the proper way, he could be a really, really good player. And they don't. They keep running him upfield. They're starting a little bit more to me, he's a running back. Use him at running back.
I think
running back, and I think he's one of the top 15 running backs in the league in certain situations. I think he's one of the worst pure receivers in the NFL.
I think what a great compliment that you could pay the guy is that he's the best running wide receiver in the league since Percy Harvin, which is also a great backhanded compliment. But anyway, Peter.
He scored 10 touchdowns last year, just FYI. So the regression of 2 touchdowns this year, he's right at that mark where I'm neutral. So I think 8 or 9 touchdowns is in the cards. Rushing, receiving, returning.
Mm-hmm. It's possible. It is very possible. One stack that we haven't mentioned yet is a quarterback running back combo. Are there any of those who kind of stand out as potential stacks for not just a cash game but a GPP? And whoever wants to jump on that question.
I think Bales mentioned one with Stafford and Theo Riddick. I think. I don't know. This one might be kind of thin, but I do like this in general. I want to play Tyrod and Sammy Watkins in this spot. I think it'll be extremely low owned because Watkins is coming off of foot surgery and because they're playing Baltimore's defense, which everybody thinks is good, but really isn't anymore. So I think Sammy and Tyrod make a lot of sense. And I wouldn't even hate throwing LaShawn McCoy in there, who nobody's talking about, but without Carlos Williams, there's like nothing behind LaShawn McCoy. I expect him to play virtually 100% of the snaps in this game against Baltimore, who like I said, I'm willing to pick on their defense pretty regularly now, even in Baltimore. So, yeah, I'm on. I think LaShawn, Sammy, and Tyrod are all really good plays, and you can play them together at really low ownership.
Yeah, I do like that.
I was going to talk about Tyrod earlier, but I didn't know how confident we were in Sammy Watkins at this point. I still think we'll see. We'll see what happens in that specific game. But love LaShawn McCoy. If you're going to target a quarterback and a running back, it is a little trickier. I talked about Carson Palmer earlier. You could go Carson Palmer and David Johnson, which I think would be extremely unique. David Johnson definitely has the capability to catch maybe 1-2 touchdowns in the best case scenario. So that's another spot that I like quite a bit. It's tough, though. The traditional pass-catching running backs, like Le'Veon Bell, Jamal Charles, aren't in play this week. So a little trickier for me to stack a quarterback and a running back.
Bales, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I talked about Stafford to Riddick, and I actually have been toying with some lineups with that. So I like that one a lot. What do you guys think overall? A guy we haven't talked about, Zeke.
I actually put him in one of my tournament lineups today. I think it's a really good leverage play against Dak. I can see all these people just pulling their hair out, being like, why is Dak just handing the ball off? Throw it, Dak. You know what I mean? And we're just sitting there taking up all the points. So if we fade Dak and roster Zeke, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm thinking there.
I like that call. Anytime you can do that anywhere. Another thing we didn't talk about is fading, Ware and going with the Kansas City passing game. A little scary going with Macklin because I think the matchup with Verrett's tough. But is it Verrett or Verrett, Adam?
Verrett, right?
Yeah, and I know the spelling. It's Verrett. And I think that could be a scary matchup. But Kelsey with Alex Smith, that could be another way to kind of go away from the herd. Kind of the same philosophy of going Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah.
Yeah, although if there is a team that would have its number 4 pick get injured in the first game of the season, once its starting quarterback has already broken his back, it would be the Cowboys. Let's get to the bold call action of the show. I want to get some bold calls from each of you. One that's maybe more football related, another that's more DFS related. How about we start with Peter? Since you are a bold guy with the Tavon Austin skill game proposition, Any bold calls for you?
My bold call is the Cardinals win by at least 2 touchdowns, which isn't crazy, but I think the Patriots are going to get blown out in this spot. Very high in Arizona from a football perspective, and I think that the Patriots could be in a lot of trouble on offense against this elite defense, especially with the Honey Badger coming back. So I guess that's not too bold, but I think that it's going to be a blowout in Arizona. Adam, what are your thoughts on that? And then another bold call just from an NFL perspective.
Yeah, it's certainly a tough spot with Jimmy Garoppolo going to Arizona. I'll give 2 bold calls. First, for fantasy, I think Jarvis Landry has a great chance to catch 10 balls in this game. There's been speculation Richard Sherman is going to go into the slot. I'm not sure. I'm buying that. He's done it so infrequently in his career. And if Seattle plays as we expect and blows out Miami, going to be a ton of opportunities for Landry, especially with Miami going up-tempo and kind of no huddle as their base under Adam Gase. So I'll say 10 catches for Jarvis Landry in a spot where nobody wants to take him because he's playing at Seattle. And then for the NFL for the season, my bold call is Washington Redskins go to the Super Bowl on the back of Kirk Cousins, on the back of their outstanding corner duo of Josh Norman and Bashad Breeland.
And Rob Kelly.
And Rob Kelly.
From nowhere. Bales, how about you?
In terms of non-DFS or a team, I'm going to say the Packers win by 2 touchdowns or more. I think that the Jaguars completely overachieved last year. I like some of the I like the philosophy of what they're doing. I think the Packers are a much, much better team, and they're going to dominate in that. Fantasy-related, of course, I'll say Corey Coleman is top 5 among receivers.
God, this is like the worst take ever.
We'll see, buddy.
And that's for the season?
Oh, no. For this week.
Skill game proposition?
Well, no. We have some around Corey. I wouldn't do it at top 5. That's my
That's a bold call. That's you being bold.
If I get
Yeah.
If I get like 6-1 on it, I would do it.
Nah. Okay, so let's get to I think the closing skill game proposition segment of this. Anyone can put out a skill game proposition. Anyone is free to accept it. And Bales, let's start with you. Any final skill game propositions for the episode?
Oh man, all mine were centered around Coleman.
I'll go first. I got one. I think Matt might want a piece of this one. I think Tajay Sharp over 5 catches in this game.
I would take 5.5.
I'm going to stick with my line of 5.
I'm not going to bite that. So the thing is, I think he's going to do fine in week 1. I think he's going to meet expectations, probably exceed them a little bit. But I think somehow over the course of the season, we're going to see history exert itself and show that a 5th-round receiver who's not really big or fast and who didn't score a lot of touchdowns in a mid-major conference is not going to set the NFL on fire. I know that's a bold take of my own, but that's just kind of what I think is going to happen. I think in week 1, I think he'll be fine.
Yeah. No, he's not going to set the NFL on fire. I agree.
All right, I have a proposition. I'll take Andrew Luck's top 3 or I'll make it easier for you guys. Top 2 quarterback week 1.
I'll take that.
Okay. Yeah, that's not a good skill game proposition.
Are we writing these down, Freedman?
I'll take that. I'm gonna have my secretary. I'm gonna have my secretary.
I feel like we need to track these, right? We need to track these.
Yeah, we need to track these. I'm gonna have my secretary listen to the episode, really take meticulous notes on all the skill game propositions, and we're gonna have a scoreboard for all of this. So yeah, Peter, I'm gonna take you on that skill game proposition.
I should have said 3. Would you guys still have been on top 3?
You didn't.
I know. I was about to, and then I was like, "Don't be stupid. Andrew Luck's too good." All right, top 2. It's locked in.
Okay, so
I would take any quarterback against top 2.
Yeah, so Bales is on that. I'm on that. Levitan, are you on that?
Yeah, I feel bad for Peter. I mean, obviously he's a huge dog.
That's fine. Right with Luck. I'm all in.
Okay.
I also have another one too. I'll throw one more out there, and I think Levitan will be on my side. Might even want to join me, but I'll say Julio Jones outscores Antonio Brown week 1.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I wouldn't take that.
Yeah, I think it's too close.
It's like people are going to say don't play Antonio Brown because of Josh Norman. I wouldn't go that far, but I think when you're comparing him to Julio, I'd rather have Julio.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Roethlisberger on the road has not been good just in general. And also the splits without Martavis for both Antonio and Ben are pretty dramatic.
Yeah, they're hashtag not as good. Any final skill game propositions? All right.
Not for me.
I think we are done. Guys, good episode. Thanks for joining. And remember, next week we're going to have Evan Silva. That's going to be a fantastic show. We've been speaking with, of course, Adam Levitan, Peter Jennings, and Jonathan Bales. And, of course, I'm your host, Matthew Freedman. We will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.